If you want to know whether or not you have been lied to, if you can't see anything wrong with the side you agree with, and you can't see anything right with the side that you disagree with, you have been manipulated. There's so many psyops that are happening all the time. Some of them, when you say psyops, a really, really good infomercial is a psyop.
Right.
So what we're talking about is the large scale.
Right.
Did you know I was personally dragged into the whistleblowing about the sexual abuse, trafficking of vulnerable women at the nonprofit organization with a false accusation by the female central to my story? I had support from some famous people like...
One man told me about being beaten by the police and left permanently disabled because of a woman's false allegation.
Hello, it's November 2025. Fear is my ally. Pain is my friend. The words of a true warrior. People need to fight to survive, not for perceived glory or true actual fear. Do you understand the difference? People are fear-based. Majority of the people, most people. And what they fear is either losing their perceived comforts or the time before a new equilibrium is established. Those are two big fears that people are driven by. And what we see, for example, is how people will fill in the gaps of a narrative that's given to them to make whatever conclusions they want work. Now I'm going to be giving two examples of this in this video. Now, the first example, and there's a lot of controversy and a lot of things unfolding here, has to do with Charlie Kirk and his assassination. And it's not so much I'm going to be discussing that, but rather how people are filling in the gaps on who he was. For example, his fame and everything else. A lot of people, because of all the hype since the event, are making claims that he was famous around the world by everyone. Now, I mentioned before how I would have included him in discussions about what I used to call online celebrities, also today known as influencers, and how these influencers are allowed to be heard and promoted. Now, Charlie Kirk was just one of many. There are a dime a dozen people going to universities and debating and so forth. And yes, among that crowd, perhaps he had some fame, but outside of that, no. He wasn't exceptionally good at it, but he wasn't exceptionally bad at it. Kind of in the middle. But as the whole world perspective, he wasn't famous or great. Now perhaps he did things on the side of that, you know, whatever it is, preaching his religion, his belief system, and so forth. But ultimately, you might have recognized his face, maybe not his name. And I didn't really catch his name until the event that took place. But the focus is not so much about the event, but how people are filling in the gaps. And when you scroll down in the comment section of these videos talking about him, it's very telling how people will fill in the gaps to either promote his fame. Oh yeah, he was famous all around the world. To his intelligence, to everything else. probably did this, he more than likely did that. They're filling in gaps. And they're sharing these fillers with others, and others will adopt them, and before you know it, untruths become accepted as truths. And we see this on any topic. Before I go into the next example, I want to highlight something here. How there's a lot of discussion as well about his wife and how she has been acting, and how she did this great speech, and how this whole stage with these fireworks and everything going off and all this other stuff, and how people are noticing that there was something off about her demeanor. She is an actress, and perhaps a very good one. Well, it's a reality TV show right now, isn't it? But there are a lot of questions surrounding not only the event of Charlie Kirk, but this aftermath. And people are kind of focusing on her at this time. People are filling the gaps, saying, oh, it's because of her religion, her belief system, she's forgiven and found peace with it all and everything else. They're filling in gaps. And what I find really most interesting is how these so-called alleged body language experts and even language experts are piping in, giving their opinion. That's all it is. It's just someone's opinion. They have a title behind their name, so people think, oh, this person knows something. They don't. It's all part of the liberal arts, theoretical pseudoscience of psychology nonsense. And if the Rosenhan experiment has proven, and it's not the only one, it's probably the most famous one, and as I've stated, I partook in a similar type of experiments, but with the same results, not to that same degree as Rosenhan experiment. Same results, and it's always the same results. The so-called expert professionals cannot diagnose anything. And this includes the so-called body language experts and language experts. Here's the thing, and I'm just going to kind of go off on this little tangent for a moment. Some people, as a descriptive, are gifted to be able to read people. And I'm not talking about reading people as how I usually refer to, but they can pick up on people and say, yeah, this person is, for example, truthful or whatever. They can pick up on these things. It's just a natural ability. Most people don't have it. But these abilities, whatever you want to call it, you cannot learn. If you have those gifts to be able to look at someone and say, oh, okay, yeah, you can pick up on subtle cues, then great. Perhaps it might enhance it a bit, but if you don't have it, you're not going to get it. A lot of these people, for example, are making assumptions with regards to Charlie Kirk's wife, saying, oh, she found peace, this and that. And there was a few of these body language experts talking about the so-called alleged assassin of Charlie Kirk and concluding that he is a complete sociopath, psychopath, everything else, you name it, because of his demeanor and how he was talking and everything else. He showed no remorse, and he went and grabbed some fried chicken or something afterwards. They're looking at it from, one, a biased perspective with limited knowledge base, assuming that he did it. What if he didn't do it? And this is where there's a lot of questions being raised. Is he a patsy? But now I'm really going off on a tangent here. I wouldn't really pay much attention to these so-called experts piping in with their mere opinions. But people will fill in the gaps, whether they're so-called professionals or not, to make their conclusions work. And that's the point here with all this. But it's not just, for example, with this event that I use as an example. There's another example I'll use. And this has to do with the ostrich farm in British Columbia, Canada. And I've talked to a lot of people who haven't dove into the topic. They haven't watched my videos about this, and they haven't watched anyone else's videos about this. And I've highlighted Maverick News and how him and this detective were talking during this interview and showing evidence of what's really going on. Evidence. Receipts of what's going on. And over the many months now, people will talk and say, oh, you know, here's a petition. So you want to sign it? No, no. And I would try to explain this to them. Send them my videos, send them Maverick's videos, and they do a complete 180 once they realize the whole thing's a scam. But once again, when you go through the comments section, you start to see how people will fill in the gaps and make up some, perhaps even a romanticized story about the whole thing without knowing any of the facts. Just what they see and hear. And just recently, I was talking to a very lovely person about this, and their whole perspective was, and I'm saying this respectfully, very romanticized about these ostriches and everything else. Now, I do feel bad for these ostriches, and I've said in previous videos when I discussed this topic directly, how these ostriches should not be in Canada. They're not designed to be in this environment with, for example, these cold winters and everything else. But when people start to be introduced to the facts, they do a 180. There are many, many more people who are still supporting these ostriches and trying to, you know, throwing money like crazy at these scammers. And I've said before, the only reason why I've taken notice of, for example, the ostrich farm and the so-called convoy of freedom and the fake heroes with that is because they take away attention, resources, and efforts from those people who are actually, as a descriptive, fighting for truth, justice, and freedom for all, and who have sacrificed everything. Just like with these online influencers, online celebrities have been selected, the same applies here as well. You see how it parallels. These events are allowed to take place. They're very highly controlled, because if they're not controlled, you can't control any outcomes. You can't control direction, and you can't control the narratives. And that's key. That is key to controlling the people. And most people buy into it. I've said many times over many years how most may wake up to one or several things, only to slumber in something else while slumbering in everything else. Somebody might be aware, awake, whatever descriptive you want to call it, to one thing, and they'll buy into another Kool-Aid. You could have just mentioned, for example, these alternative medicines like ivermectin and hydrochloroquine. People are like, yeah, I didn't buy into the official cure, so I'm going to take this other stuff. They drank the Kool-Aid. They woke up to one thing and fell asleep in something else. And then with everything else going on in the world, they're drinking the Kool-Aid on that as well. If you sit back and actually start to look, you start to see these patterns, and I've highlighted the importance of patterns, and knowing these patterns and being able to see them play out helps you survive, because as a descriptive, it makes life and everything going on around you more predictable. just things to think about. Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment, and share.
And I see a rectangle, and you're looking at a light shining from a different angle, and you say, I see a circle. What I say is true. What you said was true. The soup can is the truth. One of the things that we looked into is, does an idea have to be suppressed for my idea to flourish? And if that's true, then I am not telling the truth. I'm engaging in propagandizing and psychological warfare, psychological operations. So if I have to make people say things, or I have to suppress other ideas, then my idea sucks.
Just remember, I was one man against many. Fighting a losing battle, but I still fought to the end.
That means press on. That means endure. That means God cannot fail, and you're not going to give up. That's not an option for a child of God. This means you are going to be delivered. Listen to this and write it down if you can't remember it. You're never going to outgrow warfare. You simply must learn to fight. I hear people saying to me, when is it going to get easier? When you die.